The sun was just rising over Lamika, painting the streets with a golden glow. But inside Zuri's small kitchen, the warmth didn't reach her heart. She moved quietly, frying eggs, slicing bread, and pouring tea the way she always did. Kamau sat at the table, eyes glued to his phone, his fingers scrolling endlessly. He didn't look at her, not even once. She placed the steaming plate in front of him with a small smile, hoping for at least a thank you. Instead, he pushed the plate away with a scoff. "What use are you except cooking? And even that you do badly," he muttered, not lifting his gaze. The words hit her harder than she wanted to admit. She felt them sink into her chest like a stone, heavy and cold. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table, but she said nothing. Instead, she forced herself to sit down, pretending to sip her tea while her mind swirled with hurt. Outside, the neighbors were already laughing and calling to each other, the world carrying on as usual. But for Zuri, the morning felt darker than the night before. She wondered when her home had stopped feeling like home. The market in Lamika was alive with noise and color. Women calling out prices, the smell of fresh mangoes mixing with the scent of grilled maize, children weaving between stalls with sticky fingers and wide smiles. Zuri walked beside Kamau, carrying a woven basket filled with vegetables. She kept her head down, listening to the hum of voices and the clinking of coins. They stopped near a group of Kamau's friends, men who always laughed loudly and slapped each other's backs. One of them greeted Zuri politely, but Kamau chuckled and shook his head. "Don't bother," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She's just a burden who can't earn a single shilling. Everything she has, I give her." The words landed like a slap. The men laughed, and even a few passers-by turned their heads, smirking. Zuri felt the blood rush to her face, her ears burning. She wanted to disappear into the crowd, to melt into the ground beneath her feet. Her grip tightened on the basket, and she forced a smile, small, stiff, the kind that hides pain but convinces no one. Inside, her heart was breaking. The laughter of strangers cut deeper than Kamau's insult. She could feel their eyes scanning her clothes, her posture, as if measuring her worth and finding her lacking. She thought of the countless meals she had cooked, the endless laundry she had folded, the quiet nights she had waited for him to come home. None of it mattered here, not to him, not to them. When Kamau turned back to his friends, still laughing, Zuri took a slow breath and blinked away the tears threatening to fall. She told herself she wouldn't cry here, not in front of these people. She would keep walking, keep holding her head high, even if her heart felt like it was crumbling inside her chest. The night in Lamika was quiet, except for the steady hum of crickets outside and the low, uneven snores coming from Kamau's side of the bed. Zuri lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, her eyes wide open. The darkness around her felt heavy, pressing down on her chest. She could still hear the echo of his laughter from the market, still feel the sting of those words. A burden who can't earn a shilling. They played in her mind over and over like a cruel song she couldn't turn off. Kamau turned in his sleep, pulling the blanket closer to himself, leaving her half of the bed cold. Zuri didn't move to take it back. She wasn't thinking about warmth anymore. She was thinking about the girl she used to be. The one who dreamed of opening a small shop filled with her beadwork and handmade dresses. She remembered the late nights she spent sketching designs, her hands busy with colorful beads, her heart full of hope. She had believed marriage would bring more dreams, not take them away. Somewhere along the years those dreams had faded, like clothes left too long in the sun. She had traded her sewing needles for cooking spoons, her laughter for silence, her plans for his comfort. She had told herself it was worth it, that this was love. But lying there in the darkness, she realized love shouldn't feel this lonely. She turned her head to look at him, his face peaceful in sleep, as if he carried no weight at all. Meanwhile, she felt as though she was carrying the whole world on her shoulders. Something inside her shifted, a quiet but sharp crack. It wasn't anger. It was a decision forming deep inside her. She didn't know what she would do yet, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't keep living like this. And in that moment, she promised herself she would not let his words be the final story of her life. The next afternoon, the sound of light knocking broke the silence in Zuri's small sitting room. When she opened the door, there stood Abini, her old neighbor from years back, with the same warm smile and bright scarf wrapped around her head. They hugged tightly, the kind of hug that reminded Zuri of better days when they would sit under the mango tree, laughing over tea. Abini settled into the chair by the window, her eyes scanning the room. "You've gone quiet, Zuri," she said gently, her voice full of concern. The Zuri I knew always had beads in her hands, making something beautiful. Zuri gave a small laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Life happened," she murmured. "Dreams don't pay bills." Ebony leaned forward, her hands clasped together. "And yet, dreams are what feed the soul," she said softly. "I've seen your beadwork, Zuri. Your dresses. You have magic in your fingers. You could build something for yourself, but you need to believe it first." The words sank deep into Zuri's heart, like water reaching dry ground. It had been so long since someone had spoken to her like that, not about what she lacked but about what she could be. She pictured the old days, the colorful beads spilling over the table, the sound of scissors slicing through fabric, the joy of creating something from nothing. For a moment, her mind dared to wander. What if she could make and sell her work again? What if she could stand on her own, not as Kamal's wife but as Zuri the creator? She looked at Ebony, whose eyes were shining with belief. It was just a conversation, just a small spark. But sometimes a spark is all it takes to start a fire. And deep inside, Zuri felt the first quiet whisper of hope she had heard in a long, long time. The smell of roasted goat and spiced rice filled Kamal's mother's compound. Laughter and chatter echoed through the air as relatives gathered under the wide mango tree, plates balanced on their laps. Zuri moved between them quietly, refilling drinks, serving food, making sure everyone was comfortable. She wore her best kaitinge dress, hoping, just maybe, today Kamal would see her differently. When she brought him his plate, he didn't even look at her. Instead, with his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he said, "You all know without me, this woman is nothing. If I hadn't married her, she'd still be somewhere doing who knows what. She's only standing here because of me." A burst of laughter rolled through the group. Some looked away awkwardly, but others smirked. Zuri froze, the serving spoon still in her hand. It was as if someone had poured cold water over her. She forced a small smile, pretending the words didn't matter, but inside her heart was breaking in slow, deliberate pieces. She glanced around the compound, his aunts whispering behind their hands, the cousins exchanging knowing looks, the children running about oblivious. In that moment, Zuri felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. All the little insults over the years, all the cold looks, all the public jabs, they had led to this moment, this final crushing blow. She lowered the serving spoon, her hands trembling, and quietly stepped away from the group. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself. She had learned long ago that his pride thrived on her pain. But as she stood near the kitchen doorway, her mind was no longer numb. It was clear. She thought of Ebony's words, of the spark that had begun to grow inside her. And right there, in the middle of the noise and laughter, Zuri made her decision. She would not let another sunrise find her in this life. She would leave quietly but for good. Kamal would never see it coming. The first light of dawn crept through the thin curtains, painting the small bedroom in pale gold. Kamal was still asleep, his breathing slow and heavy. Zuri sat on the edge of the bed, her hands resting on a small worn bag. Inside were just a few clothes, her sewing needles, a packet of beads, and the little cash she had managed to save without him noticing. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She looked around the room one last time. The faded curtains she had sewn herself, the chipped wardrobe, the crack in the wall she used to hide coins behind. So many years in this space, yet none of them truly hers. Her fingers tightened around the bag's handle. She knew if she hesitated now, she might never leave. Quietly, she slipped out of bed, her bare feet making no sound on the floor. She avoided the squeaky floorboard near the door, holding her breath as she stepped into the cool morning air. The street was still asleep, except for the distant crow of a rooster and the low hum of a passing motorbike. She walked quickly, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, as if it could hide the weight of her decision. At the bus station, the early travelers milled about, vendors setting up their stalls. She bought a ticket to Kansas City without looking back. As the bus rumbled to life, Zuri pressed her forehead against the window. The familiar streets of Lamika began to fade, replaced by open fields and winding roads. Fear gripped her. She had no family waiting, no job promised, no safety net. But alongside the fear was something else, something she hadn't felt in years. It was freedom. Raw, uncertain, and terrifying, but hers. Kansas City was louder, faster, and colder than Lamika. The streets were always busy, matatas honking, vendors shouting, music spilling from tiny shops. Zuri found a single cramped room at the back of an old building, with peeling paint and a small window that barely let in light. The rent took almost all of her money, but it was a place to sleep, and for now that was enough. She unpacked her sewing needles, a few spools of thread, and the small packet of beads she had carried from home. Every morning she set up a small stool by the roadside, balancing her work on her lap. She mended torn shirts, stitched simple skirts, and made little beaded bracelets for anyone willing to stop. Some days she earned just enough to buy bread and tea. Other days she went to bed with an empty stomach, her hands aching from sewing late into the night. The city was unforgiving. Strangers brushed past her without a glance, and the sun beat down hard, making the dust stick to her skin. But she refused to let her spirit break. Each time she placed a finished piece into someone's hands, she felt a small spark of pride. She was building something, even if it was slow, even if no one else could see it yet. Hunger and exhaustion became her quiet companions, but so did determination. She thought of Kamal's voice calling her useless, and it only pushed her to work harder. She told herself, one day I won't just be surviving here. I'll be living. And every stitch she made was a step toward that day. One hot afternoon, Zuri was sitting on her stool by the roadside, threading bright yellow beads into a delicate bracelet. Sweat rolled down her back, but her fingers kept moving quick and steady. A shadow suddenly fell over her work. She looked up to see a tall woman in a flowing blue dress, holding a shopping bag. "That's beautiful," the woman said, pointing to the bracelet. Her voice was warm, but her eyes were sharp, as if she was already imagining possibilities. "Thank you," Zuri replied softly, handing it to her. The woman turned it over in her hands, examining the neatness of the beads, the strength of the thread. "I own a boutique just down the road," she said finally. "We sell handmade accessories. I could use pieces like this. Can you make more?" Zuri's heart skipped. "Yes," she said quickly, her voice almost trembling. "I can make many." The woman smiled. "I'll start with a small order. 10 bracelets. Bring them to my shop next week." She pulled a card from her bag and handed it over before walking away. For a moment Zuri just sat there, the card clutched in her hand, unable to move. It wasn't a big contract, she knew that. The money wouldn't solve all her problems, not yet. But it meant someone saw her work as valuable. Someone believed it was worth selling. That night, she stayed up late in her small room, the light from her single bulb casting shadows on the walls. Her fingers flew over the beads, her heart beating faster with every completed bracelet. For the first time since she left Lamika, she wasn't just sewing for survival. She was creating for a future. It was a small step, but in Zuri's heart, it felt like the door to a whole new life had just cracked open. Weeks turned into months, and the boutique owner kept coming back for more orders. Soon, other shopkeepers began asking about the woman who made the colorful beadwork. Zuri realized she couldn't keep working from her roadside stool forever. With the little savings she had, she rented a tiny corner space in an old market building, just enough for a table, a chair, and a shelf. She painted the walls a warm mustard yellow and hung her best bead necklaces where they could catch the light. At the front, she placed a hand-painted sign, Zuri Designs. The name made her smile. It was hers, her work, her dream, her name. Every morning, she opened her small workshop with fresh energy, her hands moving over fabric and beads with love and precision. She started sewing skirts, head wraps, and handbags, each one carrying bold African prints and patterns that spoke of home, pride, and strength. Customers didn't just buy her pieces. They stopped to talk, to watch her work, to admire the colors. Soon, people began returning, bringing friends and relatives with them. "This is the place I told you about," they'd say proudly, pointing to her sign. Word started to spread beyond the market. A woman from another part of Cassandra came with a photo on her phone, saying she had seen someone wearing one of Zuri's dresses at a wedding and wanted the same style. Zuri worked late most nights, her back aching but her heart full. She no longer worried about going to bed hungry. She was paying her rent on time, even sending a little money to a cousin back in Lamika. Each sale, each returning customer felt like proof that she had made the right choice when she walked away. Zuri Designs was small, but it was alive, and so was she. One Saturday afternoon, Zuri was arranging dresses on a rack when a young woman walked into her workshop. She was stylish, with a big smile and sunglasses perched on her head. Zuri didn't know her, but she carried herself with the kind of confidence that made people look twice. "I saw one of your dresses at a friend's party," the woman said, running her fingers over the soft chitinge fabric. "I need something like this for an event next week." Zuri showed her a bold red and gold dress she had just finished. The woman's face lit up instantly. "This is perfect," she said, paying without hesitation. She left with the dress carefully wrapped, while Zuri went back to her sewing, thinking it was just another good sale. The next morning her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages, notifications, and calls came flooding in. Confused, she opened her social media to see hundreds, then thousands, of likes and comments. The woman from the shop had posted a photo wearing Zuri's dress at a high-profile gala, tagging #ZuriDesigns in her caption. "She's the designer," the influencer had written, followed by heart emojis. People from all over the country were commenting, "Where can I buy this? Do you ship nationwide? I need this exact style." Orders started pouring in, more than Zuri had ever received in her life. Her tiny workshop suddenly felt too small for all the dreams that were rushing in. She stood in the middle of the room, phone in hand, overwhelmed with joy and disbelief. That single post had done what years of quiet hard work couldn't. ZuriDesigns had gone viral. And in that moment, she knew life was about to change forever. Months later, Cassandra's grand fashion exhibition was buzzing with music, flashing cameras, and the scent of fresh flowers. Designers, models, and reporters filled the large hall, each dressed in their finest. At the entrance, a woman stepped inside, and for a moment heads turned. It was Zuri. She wore one of her own creations, a floor-length gown made from deep emerald chitinge, with golden beadwork that shimmered under the lights. Her hair was wrapped in a matching head tie, and her earrings swung gently as she walked. There was no hesitation in her steps, no nervous glances at the ground. Her back was straight, her chin lifted, and her smile was the kind that came from knowing exactly who she was. People stopped her along the way. "You're ZuriDesigns?" they asked with excitement. Some wanted photos, others wanted to shake her hand. She spoke with ease, answering questions about her work, her inspiration, and her journey. Only a year ago, she had been sitting on a roadside stool, hoping someone would buy a bracelet. Now she was here, among the top designers of Cassandra, showing the world what she could do. The whispers of mockery that once followed her were gone, replaced by whispers of admiration. When she stood by her display, showcasing dresses that carried stories in every stitch, she caught her reflection in the glass. This wasn't the quiet, humiliated wife from Lamika anymore. This was a woman who had fought her way back to herself, and as the cameras flashed around her, Zuri felt it deep in her bones. She hadn't just built a business, she had built herself. Back in Lamika, life was no longer smooth for Kamau. His small transport business, once busy with customers, had started slowing down. First, one of his motorbikes broke down and he didn't have the money to fix it. Then a loyal driver quit, saying he'd found better pay elsewhere. Soon the few customers he had left started using other services. Bills began to pile up on his table. Rent for the garage was overdue. Fuel prices had gone up. The bank kept calling about the loan he had taken. Kamau tried to act like everything was fine, still laughing loudly at the bar with friends, but deep down worry was eating at him. One by one, those same friends started avoiding him. They no longer picked his calls or stopped by for drinks. Even family members began making excuses not to visit. The once proud man who used to walk through town with his head high now found himself slipping through back streets to avoid creditors. And then came the whispers. In the market, at the barbershop, even at the bus stop, he kept hearing Zuri's name. "Have you seen ZuriDesigns? She's on the radio now. They say she's selling dresses across the country. That woman is going places." At first, Kamau brushed it off, pretending not to care. But the words followed him everywhere. Every time he heard her name, he remembered the last things he had said to her, the way he had mocked her in front of people. Now she was the one being celebrated, while he was sinking under the weight of his own failures. And for the first time, Kamau began to realize he hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost the best thing that ever happened to him. Kamau arrived in Cassandra for a delivery job, carrying documents for a transport company that had hired him temporarily. After a long, dusty ride, he stepped into the cool, air-conditioned lobby of a high-end hotel to wait for his contact. The place smelled of fresh lilies, and soft music played in the background. He was scanning the room when his eyes froze. There, near the center of the lobby sat Zuri. She was dressed in a sleek, patterned dress from her own collection, her hair neatly wrapped, her posture confident. Around her was a small group of well-dressed clients, notebooks and fabric samples spread out on the table. They were listening intently as she spoke, nodding and smiling at her ideas. Kamau felt a strange twist in his chest. She looked different, brighter, bigger than the small life they had shared in Lamika. He hadn't seen her in over a year, but in that moment it was clear. She had outgrown him in every way. "Zuri," he called, his voice breaking the soft murmur of the lobby. She paused, looked up, and for a brief second their eyes met. There was no anger in her gaze, no sadness, just calm. She gave him a polite nod, the kind one gives an old acquaintance, and then turned smoothly back to her clients, picking up the conversation without missing a beat. Kamau stood there for a moment, his hands awkwardly stuffed in his pockets, feeling smaller than he ever had. The woman he once called useless was now commanding the room, her presence glowing in a way he couldn't touch anymore. And as he watched her laugh with her clients, he knew whatever space he had in her life was gone forever. That night, Kamau sat alone in a small, dimly lit guesthouse room. The thin curtains swayed gently with the breeze from the open window, carrying in the distant hum of Cassandra's nightlife, music, laughter, cars passing by. But inside his room there was only silence. He leaned back in the wooden chair, staring at the half-empty cup of tea in front of him. His mind kept replaying the image of Zuri in the hotel lobby, her confidence, her poise, the way she had looked at him without bitterness, but also without need. She hadn't looked like a woman missing something. She had looked whole, complete. It hit him then like a heavy stone in his chest. She had never needed him to be complete. She had always carried her own light, her own strength. He was the one who had needed her. Her patience, her loyalty, her quiet way of holding a home together. But he had mistaken her gentleness for weakness. He had laughed at her dreams, not knowing one day those same dreams would carry her farther than he could ever follow. Now that distance between them wasn't just about cities or time, it was a wall he could never climb. She had built a life without him in it, a life that looked bigger, brighter, and freer than anything he could offer. Kamau ran a hand over his face, but the heaviness didn't leave. Regret settled deep in his bones, cold and unshakable. He wanted to tell her he was sorry, but he knew the truth. She had moved on, and his apology would change nothing. Zuri was no longer within his reach. And the painful part wasn't just losing her. It was knowing he had pushed her away with his own hands. Zuri stepped out of the car and looked around at the familiar streets of Lamika. The same dusty roads, the same market smells, the same chatter of neighbors, but this time she wasn't coming back as someone's wife or someone's burden. She was coming back as Zuri Mbeki, founder of the Lamika Tailoring School for Women. The courtyard was filled with people. Young girls in colorful dresses, their eyes bright with hope, elders clapping and reporters taking photos. A long red ribbon stretched across the entrance. Zuri took the scissors in her hand, feeling the weight of the moment. This was not about proving anything to Kamau or anyone else. This was about giving other women the chance she never had, to stand on their own, to dream without fear. She glanced at the girls standing in the front row. Some were shy, some were beaming, and she saw herself in each of them. She raised the scissors, cut the ribbon, and the crowd erupted in cheers. As she smiled, it wasn't the smile of revenge. It was the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and found herself on the other side, stronger than ever. Kamau's words no longer echoed in her mind. They had no power here. Her life was her own now, shaped by her choices, her courage, and her dreams. And for the first time, Lamika didn't feel like a place of pain. It felt like the place where her freedom had taken root.